So I'm going to start by asking some questions, and then I'm sure that you guys have plenty, so I am going to open it up, but we'll give you time to kind of think about everything that you've just seen. So I thought I'd start by asking, one of the things that I think is really special and what's kind of so important about the film is that it's telling the story that isn't always told about what happens once people leave Syria and what's going on in their lives once they've, it still carries on. What was it about Lebanon that interested you, and why did you decide to take that approach in telling the story of Syria?
Thank you everybody for staying. I think, our first film we filmed in Bosnia, called In the Shadow of War. We finished that in 2014, and we were looking at a place to make a film, and Syria, the war in Syria was raging terribly, and as much as we wanted to go to Syria, we recognized that the way that we make films is by spending a lot of time in the field, which would have been very difficult inside Syria. So Lebanon is next door, and was receiving so many Syrian people. It's right next door. The proximity gave us the access to the Syrian people's stories, but the relative safety of being able to stay there and live there with the communities.
And I also think we recognized that it was a state of limbo for a lot of the Syrian people that lived in Lebanon. So we wanted to live with them for a year or two, to see what life was like, to document it, and then take their stories outside of Lebanon. So that was our main aim. And
actually, it was also before the refugee crisis kind of hit Europe. Before all the people started traveling across the Mediterranean, we were there before that. So people weren't really talking about Lebanon, and that's what we always like to do. We try and go to a part of the world where you don't actually hear many stories or many in-depth stories other than sort of fleeting news clips. So that's what drew us to Lebanon initially.
And the people that we meet in the film are incredible, and they feel like a very accurate cross-section of the people that are living in Lebanon. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to meet them and how you kind of worked with them on the film?
I think we could have probably made like 5,000 films out there, because everyone we met had pretty incredible stories and were very interactive with us. It wasn't just like we were out there working on a contract. We lived there and we became part of their lives, and they became part of our lives. So it was very difficult to finally kind of follow these four that we ended up following. But I think it was a natural thing that just occurred. We felt very close to them. They were very natural in front of the camera. It's difficult sticking a camera in someone's face. It's like I would react in a very different way than what I would normally act. So I think these four, Mufak, Sheikh, Nimr, and Reem, were just very natural on camera, and yeah.
And we felt like they weren't trying to act. And I think that's always very important. It very much felt like they didn't even remember that we were there after the first couple of months. And I think that's always very important as a filmmaker, to recognize that the people that you film are absolutely honest. And we found that was very much the case with these four.
But it's difficult to choose, because there's one young guy, I remember, Hassan, who was a contemporary dancer from Damascus, and we met him. We met him a lot of times, and he was wonderful, and we were going to film him, but we ended up not. And a year later we met him again, and he was on drugs. 6 months later after that, he jumped off a building and died.
And that was because he didn't have residence, and he felt very unwanted, and he was being arrested like all these characters in the film, which is a reality, an ongoing reality. In fact, it's getting worse.
And can you tell us a little bit about what's happened since you stopped filming, and where the characters kind of are in their lives now?
It's always the funny thing with filmmaking, obviously, because we have a long, protracted editing period. It took us nearly a year to edit this film, and we kept on going back, and we were filming updates, and then at some point we just said, actually, khalas, it's enough. We can't keep on filming, so we stopped. But we're in contact with them all the time. Reem has seen the film, Nimr has seen the film, and they love it. And they are, so Nimr has got this fantastic news, I can say it now. Nimr the young boy, this week we found out that through our contacts he's actually got his legal papers. So he's got his residence.
And since finishing the film, his situation deteriorated a lot. So he's been living outside of Beirut in the hills, and has been arrested a couple of times, and he does not react well to that. Like, that really screws screws him up. So I think the pressures were mounting on him. So the fact that he's now got his papers, it's going to change his life.
And that was directly through an individual watching this film 6 weeks ago. And he came out saying, he's a very wealthy individual, saying, I have to do something right now. And we're actually working with him, trying to get the film to change policy, which is inevitably what we want to achieve. But on a one-on-one basis, one person's life, Nimr, has been changed now, and this man is going to sponsor him throughout so he can finish high school and university. So that's a direct consequence which this film has had, which is fantastic. Mofak, actually, the artist, has emigrated, the right word, to Ecuador.
He escaped. He escaped with his, found a nice German girlfriend, so they went together to Ecuador, which was the right thing, because if he hadn't left, I don't know what situation he would be in now, because...
Yeah, his artwork was no longer enough for him to escape to. And Reem is carrying on. Did get some visas. She has been doing some short studies abroad to enhance her ability to lead. Sheikh Abdu has got a temporary visa for like 6 months, or...
But all these visas are temporary, they're like 6 months. So Nimr in December will have to go through the whole process again. Will he get his papers? Probably not. Everybody that we know still doesn't have their papers. Very few have their papers. So in general, the situation, I think, has deteriorated for them.
Yeah, and we've been waiting to be able to screen this film inside Lebanon. And the big factor why we've been waiting to do private outreach screenings is because of Nimr, because we promised him that he is so scared, he's very young and scared, so we promised him that we wouldn't screen the film until he had his legal residence. So now we can actually do some incredible outreach screenings with the Lebanese government. And many Lebanese have actually watched this film already and are very receptive to it.
I'm going to ask one more before I open it out, so do start thinking of your questions. Something that kind of stuck with me in the film is a big focus on the next generation of Syrian people and the future. I wondered if that was something that you anticipated going into the film and how that focus kind of developed for you as filmmakers.
Yeah, I think definitely. Through our experience of making In the Shadow of War, which is our first documentary in Bosnia, where it was, completely in our face. Even these young people were not born or didn't live during the war, they were born at the end of the war, their lives are still being screwed by the long-term consequences of the war. So I think we were very much looking to the long-term effects of war. And we don't have degrees in it, we don't know, all we can do is spend time on the ground and capture the stories that we find. So this is just an offering of that. It's no more of a, it's not an opinion, it's not, anything else but an expression of what we captured on the ground.
I also just want to add to that, I think, there's often attention placed on women and young children during times of conflict and post-conflict. Of course, that's critical, but often what gets overseen is the very critical age of Nimr, like the late teenage year, especially the males. Like, what can they do? They're out of school, and that's when, often recruitment happens to various armed forces because it's an element of identity. They belong to something, they feel useful, they can get paid. So I think that's what, for us, Nimr very much highlighted that in this film, and I think it's a very important sector to look at.
Okay, so I'm going to open it out. If there's any questions, if you just want to pop your hand up, we've got a microphone. Anybody want to be first?
Don't be shy, you can ask any question you like. And it can be critical, it can just be an opinion as well.
Maybe we said everything, we kind of talked a lot.
Yeah?
You mentioned previously that you were thinking of taking this film elsewhere, so what are your plans, what are your next steps?
Right, well, the film premiered in March at the Human Rights Watch Film Festival in London, and they have selected it for their New York festival, which happens next month, which is amazing, because Human Rights Watch have very selected amount of films that they screen each year. So the film will be screened in June in 2 venues in New York. Then the outreach is a whole other thing with this film. So 2 weeks ago we had a big screening with over 200 people at Chatham House, which is a think tank here in London. So screenings like that are ongoing, and you should definitely follow our website, which we're busy trying to update in a better way.
I think there's 3 kind of targets we're working on at the moment, and that is the general audience, just to raise awareness about the situation in Lebanon and also Turkey and Jordan. And also then the educational system, so we're doing different versions to put into schools and universities. And then we're also doing political screenings, so we've got a 20-minute conference version, which we'll be taking to the German Parliament, European Parliament, House of Lords here. So we'll be doing lots of screenings in the political arena as well. Maybe this film won't make any difference, maybe it will. So we'll just try and just try something with it.
Got go to you, and then we'll come to the front.
Congratulations both on the film. I was just wondering, you both said that you were living there in Lebanon. I was wondering kind of timeframes, how long you were living there for, and if when you decided to make the film and move there, if you kind of blocked out a certain amount of time and thought, right, we're going to be there for X amount, and then that's how long you stayed.
So we first went out to Lebanon in October 2014. It was kind of just for a recce. We wanted to get an idea of what it was like on the ground. We had never been, well, we'd been once before. We didn't know the country very well. And we met a lot of NGOs. We went down the usual route of looking at the biggest camps kind of in the Bekaa Valley and stuff. Then we went away for a month and looked at our material and decided this was definitely the area where we wanted to spend more time. So we went out for another month. And then from that January 2015, we then stayed for a year and a half. Coming back here to fundraise because we did it completely independently. So we were always cutting trailers with the material that we filmed. So we spent a year and a half there, but we would be going back and forward, spending between 3 and 6 weeks there at a time, coming back here for a month fundraising, going back out. And then actually, we also spent time editing there for a brief period of time, 6 weeks with a Lebanese editor, because most of the film is in Arabic, and our Arabic is atrocious. So we tried to work very closely with him in Beirut, and that was nice as well because we could bring some of the characters in and watch parts of it. They're very much part of the film, and so.
But the film kind of really took form in January 2015, and that's when the Lebanese government changed their visa policy towards the Syrian people. So, and that's when we're like, oh, maybe that's what this film will be about. We have no idea. When we get to a country, we start making a film, we could be there for 6 weeks, we could be there for 6 years. Like, that's how we see it. We just have no idea. We let it just happen naturally. And I think that's what allows us to kind of explore all sorts of stories there. And maybe that's also why our personal lives are screwed.
But just to finish on that question, we don't ever have a time frame, and that's why we like being independent filmmakers, because ultimately it's up to us. If we feel like we need to spend 3 years filming and then a period of time editing, we can do that. But with this film, we actually did try to rush it, because once we were on the ground and we saw these people and their lives were unraveling, they got every month we would go back and it was worse and worse, and we wanted to get the film out to try and change something. So we had this horrible whirlwind of time where we just were trying to finish the film. And it was actually very unpleasant because we felt like we owed it to the people that we met, and which is why it's even more powerful that Nimra just got his papers.
We got another question. Yep.
Did you hear any stories about? Do you want me to? Yeah. I've got quite a loud voice. Not loud enough.
Thanks. Did you hear any stories about deportations back to Syria? And, well, first of all, did you get an indication of what kind of level of numbers we're talking about? And what is happening to people when they do get deported?
I think through Sheikh Abdul, who was arrested, he was actually arrested, I think, at the end of around 5 different times. He heard whispers and stories within, the prisons. We personally didn't meet anybody who had been deported, but it was always a threat. So whether you're deported or not deported, but you're being threatened to be deported, that affects your life. So I don't think there are any. We're in touch with Human Rights Watch a lot, and they do lots of work on the ground. But it's very difficult to monitor these kind of things. People disappear all the time. At one point from Tripoli, 600 young people disappeared a week back into Syria. Whether they were being paid by ISIS to fight or whether they were being paid by someone to fight. And then 6,000 people a week were disappearing from the port of Tripoli to Europe via boat. So, the movements of people are so difficult to monitor in a place like Lebanon.
And particularly in Lebanon as well, and when we were always trying to kind of fact check, which is really important. It was very difficult to find right numbers, and I think there haven't been hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of people deported, but it does happen.
Can we bring the mic to the front?
Hi, I just want to say a huge thank you for kind of showcasing their stories and sharing their lives with us. I think I was really touched by it. My question would be, you mentioned that you wanted to showcase this in Lebanon. Have you been trying to kind of get in touch with the Lebanese authorities and really trying to change their mindsets in terms of kind of reopening the borders to let Syrian refugees in?
Yes, so we are in touch with the Lebanese authorities, and we've just actually had the film vetted by the General Security, who have to kind of give it a stamp of approval for it to be screened within Lebanon. We've had various representatives from the embassy here watch the film at past screenings, and they're all very much in favour in using it as a tool. And we're working with a local organisation that works regionally, but they're based in Lebanon, called Adian. You can see their details on our website, and they do a lot of work as well around awareness raising. They work on the ground with refugees and connecting local communities with the Lebanese government. So yes, very much so, and in fact that's the only reason why we make films is the tool that it can be.
But I'm also not sure, I mean, Lebanon has huge amounts of refugees in their country, and I don't know if they can handle it anymore, to be honest. So, I mean, we don't blame Lebanon for what they've done. I feel very bad for Lebanon. We think that Europe's experienced a refugee crisis. Well, I mean, Lebanon's been experiencing it right from the beginning. So the aim of the film is not to put pressure on the Lebanese to reopen their borders. It's to actually also call on the international community to try and help Lebanon, and that is through resettlement. Resettlement. There is so much space on this planet, there's so much opportunity for Syrian people on this planet, and it needs to be more open. That's what I think.
Got time for a few?
I think Sylvia was putting her hand up a lot.
Maybe in the middle.
Oh, in the middle? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It seems to me you have a very good method, because you when there are very, very large problems, they seem absolutely impossible to solve. But I think what's good about your method is that you take one small part of the problem, which in this case is looking at what's happening in Lebanon, and then it helps us to see how what's happening in Lebanon affects everything else as well. So it's a very good method. That's the first aspect. And the second aspect is the strategic approach to thinking about where in the world there is still some elements of rationality left and democratic governments left. Perhaps your film can be in some way useful in relationship to that, which is a great achievement. I was a little bit worried about some of the sound, some of the music, because it was so very threatening that all I worry about is that the more, I don't know if other people in the audience felt this or not, but if you get beyond a certain sense of anxiety, your brain switches off actually. So it's a small point. But, clearly it's nothing like the anxiety felt by the people in the film, but you might just want to think about that.
That was the idea, that we wanted to try and bring some of that uncertainty and uncomfortable feeling that the characters had, that we felt through the use of music. So we worked with the composer to try and achieve that. It was quite loud as well.
I understand, but I think you want your audiences to keep their brains switched on.
Thank you.
We definitely want that, yeah.
Just one last thing. The single most frightening thing to me in the film was the information that the refugee agency had stopped registering people. Because that suggests to me that all of the protections that supposedly were put in place over the years, whether it's the Geneva Convention or refugee treatment in the period after the Second World War, that those protections that we thought we had in place internationally are breaking down. And that's absolutely terrifying. So, well, thank you for bringing it to us.
Thank you.
Do you still have a question? One in front?
Thank you. That was a really amazing film, so thank you. I think one of the complexities, obviously, with the context is partly the fact that there's not that recognition of refugees, and also the backlash from the high number of Palestinian refugees in the country that is now being experienced by Syrians. But also it's the complexity around the fact that they won't have refugee camps, large refugee camps for Syrians, so people are dotted around the country. And it's quite hard to provide services for people. But I think one of the things that I'm interested in is, because of the way people move, so often it can be a community leader that goes initially to Lebanon and then members of the community follow. But sometimes when people are able to have, the basics of work, which is often physical hard labour, there can be situations where community leaders start to exploit members in the community and maybe sometimes connected to gangs or mafia in terms of basically bonded labour or slavery. So you've come over from Syria to escape, but basically then you're doing hard labour and then completely exploited and maybe not receiving any funds for that or not sufficient funds, and also children are being used in that. And I'm just wondering if you picked up any of those dynamics or complexities within Syrians in Lebanon.
Yeah, I mean, even before the war, the borders were open, so you had a lot of migrant workers would come in and, participate in olive harvesting and construction and things like that. So that kind of work still happens, and in fact, when the visa laws changed, it was catastrophic because it cut the lifeline for a lot of people that were still crossing back and forward. I mean, in the north, in Akkar, we didn't see slave labor or anything, but just by the fact of the parents having the risk of being arrested at checkpoints, and there's many checkpoints you see up in the north, there's a lot of Lebanese military, the natural reaction of that is that you send your younger teenage children out to work because they're less likely to get stopped. So, I mean, absolutely, in Sheikh Abdul's camp, some of the young teenagers under the age of 18 were going out to work, whether it was in construction or olive harvesting or anything that could earn them some kind of money. Yes, so.
I think when you have no laws like for the Syrians at the moment in Lebanon, I think they're obviously wide open to all sorts of abuses. And I think a lot of the hard labour stuff is happening in the Bekaa Valley just because there's so many there, and it's really camp based. Like a lot of Syrians still in the Beirut or in the north have some sort of accommodation, but whereas in the Bekaa Valley it's just, they're all out in tents and stuff. So it's probably less easy to document.
There's a lot of child marriage happening.
Yeah.
You see a lot of that. Every time we went back, we were like, is she married yet? Is she married yet? And that's why Sheikh Abdul is an amazing character, because as a Sunni sheikh, he's very moderate. He really promotes all the girls going to school, and he really tries to intervene if there's any kind of young marriage happening, but it's a natural consequence because it's a means of families helping themselves, or helping their children.
We've got time for 2 more if there's... We'll go into the middle. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your documentary. I believe since a lot of people they don't know what's happening in that side of the world, so it's a very good eye-opener. I was just wondering, because you said that you interviewed a lot of people, were there points where you had a break point and you would just stop shooting? And how would you grapple with those emotions, and whether you used to keep it strictly professional and just move on? Because I believe, as you said, that there were so many stories, they were incredible, and how did you used to manage with those things and experience these things?
It wasn't strictly professional, and I'm ever really, because that's how, maybe because we're sisters, I don't know, we take a very intimate approach. There's a lot of time that we spent with the characters and other people off camera. Emotional moments, I mean, there were many, and actually I don't like putting lots of crying into a film. I find it slightly voyeuristic, and I wouldn't want to see myself cry on screen, so we did it very carefully on 2 times with Sheikh Abdul's wife and Reem, where they are getting upset, and actually Nimr as well, but we cut that. It happened a lot with Reem's father, which was a very powerful scene in the film, but we had to actually remove it for their safety. So now you see their faces are blurred, and that's because her father was there living in Syria and still are, and was having a lot of issues with authorities there. So we had to conceal their identity, but there was an extremely moving scene that we filmed with him where he was talking about his country and before the war and not wanting to leave, his house that he built with the trees that he planted for his grandchildren. It was very emotional, and actually it's something extremely emotional when an older gentleman gets upset. And it was a very emotional thing, and we did have some of that in the film, and Reem was happy with it. She was okay with it because it was so powerful, and he really hit home the consequences of the conflict. But we had to remove it because of his safety, not because he was upset. But it was we spent a lot of time being upset, to be honest, because it's real and raw, and still is somehow.
Along with this, I was just wondering what were the greatest difficulties that you faced on the spotlight in Lebanon filming?
Wow, so many. I mean, from everything from fundraising to operating to continuing to film characters, knowing that they're going through difficult times. Like, where are the boundaries? When are we friends? Or when are we filmmakers? You know, that line's always blurred with us. So, you know, when is that moment to put the camera down? And I remember that day when Reem's father, when he cried, and Sophia's like, yo, should I continue filming? Should I not? It's like your heart's saying one thing, your mind's saying another thing. But I mean, making this kind of film independently is seriously difficult. On all levels. From editing, we couldn't find the right editor properly, so I had to end up editing most of it, which I'm not an editor,
You are now.
especially in a foreign language. In a long format documentary, we had so many hours of rushes, But every time we went back on every single trip, it was the characters who made us continue. They were the only people who gave us the courage and the inspiration and the drive to finish this film. No one else.
But issues on the ground. I mean, in the north, we initially didn't go to the north because we were told absolutely, by all means, do not go because it's very active ISIS and various other extremist groups. So we initially went with that advice for 3 weeks, and then realised that actually, having visited the Bekaa and stuff, where there were a lot of journalists and a lot of people, we felt that the Bekaa region of Lebanon is the poorest region, and it was housing the most Syrians actually, which wasn't really known. So we ventured up there, and we were petrified because we had this idea. I was hired 3 years before that, and there was active war in Tripoli. So my memories was like sleeping at night listening to gunfire. And I was like, no way are we going to go and embark and find a character that we love and then not be able to film them or risk, being kidnapped or whatever. So that was our initial reaction. But then by the time we had finished filming the film, I mean, we would sleep up there with our doors unlocked in a little local, in the peace centre actually that you see.
That was not by choice, there was no lock.
There were no So we were very relaxed, and we used to go. We got to know the local communities, and they really, the Lebanese and the Syrians welcomed us, and we felt very secure with our presence.
But it was always in the back of our minds, like what was happening just across the border. I mean, when the Battle of Homs was happening, and other battles on the border, we could hear it at night for sure. And we were, and one of the Italian volunteers wasn't allowed out the house for a week because there was ISIS on the borders, and they were looking for Italians because Italians paid ransom. So it's always on the, operating in that kind of environment. It's just always slightly stressful. But if you don't do it, then you don't make a film. So
I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. But thank you so much for coming tonight, and please join me in thanking Sophia and Georgia.
Thank you. Thank you, Chloe.